Joachim Trier follows up his most widely seen and acclaimed film, The Worst Person in the World, with his sixth feature, Sentimental Value. A film that finds him reuniting once more with actress Renate Reinsve, who immediately made waves after Worst Person premiered back at the 2021 Cannes Film Festival, introducing her to the world as a truly extraordinary talent. And here we find Reinsve operating in a very similar, mournful mode of performance, but one that still expands upon and deepens their collaboration in many interesting ways. As with Sentimental Value, Reinsve's character, Nora, isn't exactly the central focus of the story. Instead, the film is largely constructed around an old, picturesque family home in Oslo that has been passed down from generation to generation, pretty serious foundational problems notwithstanding. Trier chooses to open the film with a delicate, neatly structured montage of the history of this home, a collection of memories and feelings, both seminal and seemingly minor, that meld into each other, all from the many people that have lived within the walls of this striking residence, before Nora had even stepped a foot in it. Trier twists us through these moments, ushering us into his deeply moving film about a fractured family finding their own ways to come back together again, about how we have the power to reshape the narrative of our own lives through the artistic process, and maybe heal the wounds that have plagued this family for years. I've found that reciting the plot of a Joachim Trier film always does the work a disservice, but the very basic machinations of Sentimental Value's plot is that Reinsve's Nora is a rising performer who is fresh off a popular television series and is now deeply involved in some local stage work. After the death of her mother, both Nora and her sister Agnes are inadvertently reunited during, of all things, their mother's wake with their father, famed art house filmmaker Gustav Borg, played by Stellan Skarsgård, in what is his finest performance in years. Gustav has been a largely absent figure in their lives ever since the divorce from their mother when they were young girls. Nora now wants absolutely nothing to do with him, while her sister wants to avoid conflict altogether and is willing to give him another shot. But a reconciliation with his daughters is not the only thing on Gustav's mind. He, a celebrated filmmaker with no work released in the past 15 years or so, has now prepared his comeback feature. A film he no less wrote with Nora in mind for the lead character, and that entirely takes place in their very childhood home. Gustav is this selfish, self-serious old man that, while lending the film many of its most comedic moments, in particular one birthday gift-giving scene that had the entire audience rolling, but he is also the most tragic figure in the entire film. An aging, dissatisfied auteur that turns up at the doorstep, screenplay in hand, of the family he once discarded like nothing, wanting to now intrude on their lives, acting like nothing ever happened between them. But the wounds of the past are still unhealed, the conflicts of old never confronted. For Gustav, it's only once he begins to see his friends and trusted collaborators begin to wither away, once his creative control begins to loosen its grip, once his children go on to start their own families and find success entirely separate from him. Only then does Gustav Borg begin to realize how truly hollow this life he has led for so long is. At the latter stage of his life and his career, he now wants to stand alongside the children he refused to watch grow up so long ago. As you can tell, Sentimental Value is a much more somber, emotionally direct film than Worst Person was. Trier is dialing back that vibrant energy, the vim and verve his previous film possessed, in place of something more nuanced and minor key. The images he and his cinematographer Casper Tuxen are creating may echo Worst Person in some ways, but with far less showy technique. There is no moment that rivals the drug trip scene or the now famous sequence when time freezes as Reinsve runs through the streets of Oslo. However, Trier's carefully constructed screenplay, of course co-written with frequent collaborator Eskil Vogt, does make room for a handful of impressive visual moments, with some sequences where Trier is showing scenes from Gustav Borg's filmography, where he's now having to shoot in an entirely different filmmaking style, one that doesn't feel entirely too dissimilar from a filmmaker like Andrei Tarkovsky's, in these handful of very involved, heavily choreographed oneers that are very impressive moments of filmmaking prowess in a largely restrained, unshowy film. Because each moment of this story feels so grounded and true to life. These actors feel a part of a real family, entirely unvarnished and so emotionally truthful. Every performer in the film clearly has so much love for and pays such close attention to their characters and their humanity. I've already mentioned Renate Reinsve and Stellan Skarsgård, but the rest of the actors that filled out this ensemble, Elle Fanning, Inga Ibsdottir Lilius, and Trier regular Anders Danielsen Lee, are all excellent supporting figures that help Trier bring to life his graceful depiction of the ways people shuffle in and out of our lives, as well as the things that go unsaid between parents and their children for years that may or may not ever rise to the surface. I've been thinking a lot about the title, Sentimental Value, as the film essentially stands in complete defiance of everything that title stands for. This is not a treacly or emotionally manipulative film in any way, just a very tender documentation of people coming together to grow. When Nora was a young child at school, she was asked to write an essay, imagining she was speaking from the perspective of any object of her choosing, and she chose her family home, a place that may not exactly hold the fondest of memories, as it is a place defined by much familial strife, and yet, even at such a young age, Nora is so deeply connected to this place. A home that is not only the place she and generations of her family were raised in, but that years later will be full of her now deceased mother's belongings, and where her father has decided will be the setting of the feature film he wrote for her, a film that is also very clearly about Nora. But it's only through divorcing themselves from that very haunted space, whether it be through the lens of a camera or the constructed walls of a set, that is where true harmony begins to present itself. Whatever sentimental value that home may have possessed washes away, and these characters are no longer blinded by the pains of their past. They're finally free to let go for a moment and simply just try to reconcile, tough as it may be. Try to help understand one another's pain in order to understand their own. And that makes for one of the most moving finales in a film I've seen in a very long time. Something that I just haven't been able to shake since I first experienced it. Truly, it's gonna be hard to find another film this year that touched me in the way Sentimental Value did. That brought me to tears, made me laugh, tapped into many of the things tossing around in my head as I and my loved ones grow older. How important it is to restore certain relationships, to not forget the pains of the past, but let them go for a moment and try to forgive. It was exactly the film I needed at this particular junction in my life, speaking to me in ways I honestly wasn't prepared for going in. Joachim Trier continues to show why he's one of the rare, true humanist filmmakers we have working today. His work, from Reprise to now Sentimental Value, have been such well-observed portraits of the collision of art and life, fractured individuals and their families. The way he frames his environments with such evocative power, the way he writes his characters and their stories with a staggering sensitivity, and just the way each one of his films feel like they come from somewhere real. It's something we don't get very often, and so I will always hold his work very close to me, hoping that one day I can think back on one of his frames or one line of dialogue his character may have said that can help me to forget and forgive, even if it is for just one moment.